The very first unit of the 11th course, as per our NCERT book prescribed by CBSE, we have the first chapter of the first unit, the living world, which we will be starting today. This particular chapter will be completed in 2 lectures. Today we start with the first lecture of this particular lesson. Now first we have to know what is the meaning of living. Living, when we say, many things come to our mind. The different characteristics that define any object to be living differentiates it from a non-living. There are certain characteristics that comes to our mind, like growth, reproduction, different forms, movements, locomotion. These different characteristics peep up in our mind. Today we will try to learn about what are these characteristics actually. Living organisms. So when we say living organisms, what comes to our mind? What comes to our mind? First and foremost, of course, we ourselves, the humans. Plants that are growing around us, different types of plants, the habitats, the flora that is around us, the jungles, the forests, the insects, our pet animals. Again, here the picture shows forest land, plants that are coming out from a seed, then different types of fruits, vegetables, animals, different forms of wild animals, domestic animals, even microorganisms. All these comes under living organisms. We are quite familiar with it. Now, again, the same question arises. What defines these as living? What differentiates it from a non-living? So here today we will learn about the characteristics. So an organism is said to be living if it exhibits the following characteristics. What are they? Growth. If anything grows, we say it to be living. Reproduces, we will call it as living. Metabolism. Metabolism, which means the different set of chemical reactions occurring in the living system. We will call it to be living. Then also, if it is able to sense its surroundings, what is existing around it, then also we will call that particular object, if it is able to sense its surrounding, we will call it as living. Now, we have to learn each of these features, these characters in details. What does each word mean? So let us move forward. Growth. The very first characteristic of being living. Now, what is growth? How do we define growth? It is the irreversible increase in mass or size of an organism. Irreversible, which cannot go back. If it has started from a tiny speck, a tiny size, it grows, it becomes bigger, it increases the mass or the size, but it cannot go back to that original form. That is the meaning of irreversible. Now, how does this increase in mass or size of the organism occur? It is merely through the process of cell division. That is, the cells divide. One cell into two, two cells into four, four cells into eight. It goes on that way, and finally you get a group of a cluster of cells. So thereby the number of cells increases, and consequently the size of the organism also increases. So the basic principle behind growth is cell division that is occurring in living organisms. Now, the growth in plants is indefinite. Indefinite in the sense that plants, they continue to grow. There is nothing like fixed growth in case of plants. They keep on growing. As you can see in this picture, from a seed, the seed germinates, the plant has started growing, it grows, it will keep on growing till its death. Till its death, maybe the rate of increase will decrease, That means rate of the growth will reduce. It may not be at the same rate as it was happening in the initial time, but it keeps on growing till its death. Whereas in animals, the growth is definite. Definite in the sense that, as you can see here, the tadpole, it grows to become the adult frog. Now, adult frog, it will not keep on growing till the time it dies. There is a fixed size where it will stop its growth. It will not grow beyond that size. Same case in humans too. In humans too, from an infant, a kid, then gradually the person grows adult, old, and then dies. But it does not keep on growing indefinitely. This is the aging process. But after a certain size, after attaining a certain size, usually the person, the humans, the growth does not keep on increasing indefinitely. So that is why we say that in animals the growth is definite. Now, what about unicellular organisms? Now, unicellular organisms, it is made up of a single cell. Its whole identity is the single cell. So, for it, growth and reproduction is synonymous. As we can see here, this is the parent cell. This is a unicellular organism, single-celled organism, the main cell. What will happen? It divides. It divides to form two new cells. Two new cells. Now we can call this growth because the cell is dividing. At the same time, the way it is dividing, what is happening? It has its own individuality. This becomes one individual, the other one becomes another individual. That means two new individuals have been formed from one parent cell. So here, that is why we say growth is synonymous with reproduction in case of unicellular organisms. Now, growth in living things, living organisms to be more precise, is internal. It takes place internally through cell division. Cells divide, that results in increase in mass or increase in the number of cells. So it happens internally. As you can see here, the seed, it gradually germinates, it grows, it produces flowers, that means it matures. So how is this happening? This is happening because the number of cells are increasing at every stage. It is continuously increasing, that is why it results so. Now, same thing in case of a hen out here, we can say chicken. Now the egg hatches. How does the egg hatch? Because division occurred within it, the cell inside, which is a single cell, it divides, it forms the young chick, it grows to become the adult. Same in case of humans. It is due to increase in number of cells that we keep on growing. Now, in non-living things too, growth can take place. But that growth is external. Non-living things grow. They increase in size. Grow means they increase in size, because basically we have already seen growth means increase in size. So even non-living things, they grow, they increase in size. But this is due to addition of materials. Like say here, the sand stretches, they can increase. The sand dunes, they can increase. Mountains, they can grow. So now this growth of non-living materials, non-living things, is due to addition of external materials externally. So what does it mean? So growth here is due to addition of external materials, not due to internal materials. Internal objects are not increasing. Just as in living organisms, there is increase in the number of cells, but not in non-living things. Now, why are we discussing about growth in non-living things? Because growth we have taken as a characteristic of being living. Now, if we take characteristic of living, growth as a characteristic of living, then it should be unique for living organisms. But we can see here, even non-living things, they are growing, though the pattern is different. So what we can imply from this is that growth cannot be the only defining property of being living. There has to be some other properties in order to define anything as living. Let us move forward. The next characteristic, that is reproduction. Now, what is reproduction? Reproduction is formation of a new individual from uh, a parent of its own kind. So, new perpetuation of the species, for continuation of the species, reproduction takes place. Now, some pictures I've kept here. There's the parent and the offspring, the tiger and the cub, then the plant, the main plant, and the young plant here, which is the offspring. These are microbes. These are microbes. They are growing. The parent, the cell division, new offsprings are arising. Now, even here, you can see this is the offspring and the parent and the offsprings. Parent and the offspring. So, here you can see everywhere the new individual is of the same type as the parent. So, why are these new individuals produced? To continue the race, to continue the species. Now, reproduction can be of two types, asexual and sexual. In asexual, it is uniparental, that is, single parent is involved, and a new organism is produced directly from the parent by simple cell division. As you can see here, the parent cell divides, the nucleus divides, cytoplasm divides, and the new daughter cells are formed. Only one single parent. Whereas in sexual reproduction, there is involvement of two parents. It takes place by the fusion of gametes. Gametes are produced by the two parents. Both the parent individuals will have to produce the gametes. The gametes unite together, egg, like this is a case of humans that is given here. So 23 chromosomes from the mother, that is who develops the egg, and 23 with 23 chromosomes, the male gamete. Female gamete and male gamete fuse together to form the zygote, from which develops the new individual. So here there is involvement of two parents, which leads to fusion of gametes. No gamete fusion is involved in asexual reproduction. Now, there are some animals which are sterile. Non-living things, they cannot reproduce, but there are some animals which are sterile. Sterile means they are unable to reproduce. Say, for example, the mule. The mule, which is a hybrid of horse and donkey, it cannot reproduce. They are always sterile. The worker female honeybee, it cannot reproduce. Now, so does it mean that these two are non-living? Or is it so that non-living things cannot reproduce? Some animals are also unable to reproduce. So can we relate these two? So here comes a confusion, that can reproduction be considered as a characteristic of being living? Because we know the mule is a living, the honeybee, this female worker honeybee is a living organism, but then they cannot reproduce. We are taking reproduction as a characteristic of being living. So how do we define this? How do we explain this? So even for this case, such cases, we can say that only reproduction cannot be the defining characteristic of being living. We have to consider other characteristics as well. Third is metabolism. Now, what is metabolism? Chemical reactions occurring inside the body of any living organism, microorganism to the largest of the animals or plants. Sum total of all metabolic reactions that takes place inside the body is called as metabolism. Now, the reactions can be of two types, catabolic and anabolic. Catabolic is the breaking down process where glycogen, example, this is an example, glycogen that is present in the human body, that is stored, the glucose is stored in the form of glycogen. If required, it will be broken down to form glucose that will release energy. But if sometimes what happens, the glucose, the excess glucose that is present in the body, they will combine to form glycogen in the body again. That we will call as anabolic. Why we are calling it anabolic? This is building up. Glucose units are joining up together with the help of glycosidic bond to form glycogen. So that is why it is anabolic process. Another example of anabolic is photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, what happens? The molecules, carbon dioxide and water, they combine together, they react together. through the process of photosynthesis and following the entire process, and finally lead to the formation of glucose and starch, resulting in formation of starch. So we call it as anabolic, building up process. The same starch, when it is broken down to give energy, we will call it as catabolic. Or respiration process, when glucose breaks down to release energy, even then it will be called as catabolic process. So summing up, catabolic is breaking down, anabolic is building up process. So all metabolic reactions in the body involve catabolic and anabolic reactions. Now, the body of of organisms, living organisms, they are made up of cells, as we all know. Cells have organelles, nucleus. Okay, this is example of organelle. Organelles are present. Now, organelles are responsible for carrying out the metabolic reactions. Another example of this is cells, human blood cells. So blood cells, individually these cells are involved in metabolic reactions. At a cellular level, metabolic reactions occur. Tissues, human skin tissue. This is an example. Now, what are tissues made up of? Tissues are again in turn made up of cells. They are made up of cells. So individually in each of the cells, the metabolic reactions are occurring. As a whole, we will see the effect in the tissues. Tissues join together to form organs and organ systems. Stomach, intestine make up the human digestive system. Now, each of these systems, they are in turn made up of cells. So such processes, catabolic, anabolic processes, that is, the metabolic reactions, are in fact taking place inside the cells of each of the organs and organ systems. And finally, we will see the effect in the organ or the organ system. But if we go down at the cellular level, metabolic reactions are occurring. Now, do chemical reactions occur outside? Yes, they do occur outside in the lab. In the lab around us, a lot of chemical reactions are occurring. So for chemical reactions to occur, not necessarily a living organism has to be there. Even in inanimate objects, metabolic reactions can occur. So even here, we can say, even with this characteristic, we can say that only metabolic reactions or metabolism cannot be the defining principle of life. But of course, here one difference comes. In living organisms, this reaction is taking place inside a cell, but outside it is taking place in any suitable environment. Then the last characteristic of being living, consciousness. What is consciousness? Awareness of the surroundings. Response to stimuli. What we hear, what we sense, that is consciousness. It can be considered as the only defining property of living organisms. It is a unique property of living organisms which is never found in non-living things. Non-living objects cannot respond to stimuli. It is exclusive property of only living organisms. As you can see here, these flowers, these are sunflowers. That what is the stimuli? That means they move towards sunlight. So that is the response to stimuli. Stimuli is the sunlight. Likewise, the response here. The response is, this is a predator chasing a prey. Now that is the response to stimuli. This is running away because it is being chased. Here, response to stimuli, as you can see here. Then likewise here, movement towards light, the phototropic movement and geotropic movement towards gravity, the roots. So here, response to stimuli, the movement of the eyes, facial expressions, these are all response to stimuli. Consciousness, we have sense, that is why we are responding. Plants moving towards light, the movement towards light, so that is a type of response to stimuli, phototropic movement of plants. Our ears, we respond to the stimuli, the sound waves. Our skin, that is we respond to touch, to sensations, different forms of sensations. So that is consciousness or response to stimuli. So here, these are the four properties which define life: growth, reproduction, metabolism, and consciousness. But individually, only one single character cannot define anything to be living. For anything to be living, it has to fulfill all the four properties. If not four, at least most of the properties it has to fulfill. Only then we can consider anything to be living. So next day we will move forward with the same chapter, the rest part of it. Thank you.